Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Life Stories Worldwide live broadcast where we share life stories on social media, stories from all over the world, going all over the world. We welcome especially those in Ukraine who are watching and those from Torch Trust who are listening to this broadcast today. We bring you stories of struggles, joy, pain, hurt, different things that have happened in people's lives, happiness, fulfillment. And these stories can be viewed again and again on our YouTube channel. We can be contacted through our website, LifeStoriesWorldwide.com, where you'll find resources to help you, such as our Life Stories Bible app, which you can download for Apple or Android. You can also find a Gideon's Bible app, which you can use for your own personal use. You can contact us if you wish on our hotline, +44 794 355 0287, if you want to know more about us and what we do. And today, our life story comes from Scotland, where we have Bruce McEwen, who's waiting to share his story. Bruce will share a story of, struggles and pain and trials and a life of almost destruction. But he had a second chance, which he'll share with you today, and how his life was completely transformed. So I'm going to hand over now, and thank you, Bruce. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to share your story. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan. Everyone, hi, my name is Bruce. I'll begin from the beginning. I was born into what you'd call a typical British Forces dysfunctional family. I was what they call an army brat. My dad was a career soldier. He was from Scotland. He certainly liked to play hard, work hard. My mum was a Yorkshire lass. I was the youngest of three older sisters, and we were fortunate to live all over the world. I was born in Germany. I got to live in Hong Kong, England, Scotland, and the thing was, as a youngster, I was quite a mischievous lad. Came from a very close family. We had our issues like any other family, but the good thing was we were close. My dad was, I would say, quite old school. He didn't voice his emotions, but he certainly showed his love through physical affection. Like any young lad, I was a lad that always wanted to hear my dad say that he loved me and he was proud of me. Something that I unfortunately didn't hear a lot of as a youngster, but through my dad's affection and the time that I spent with him, I knew that he loved me. Anyway, as I was saying, I was quite a young, mischievous boy, and we moved around. We had the opportunity to live in Hong Kong for 2 years. And where we lived, it was all high-rise flats. And there used to be what we called the hatch in the centre, where there was a playground roundabout, and it had a tin roof. And here, this is where they used to dry the fish that they would cook for the Chinese restaurant. And my sister, she was one of the head girls at high school, and she was going out with the head lad. And they were in the popular crowd. And I remember I used to get, as I said, I got up to all sorts, and I was climbing up on the roof, and my sister trying to act cool in front of her friends, telling me to come down. And I said, no, I'm not going to. And I started to me and my friend, we started to proceed chucking the fish at her. Tell you what, I certainly got what for that night. Anyway, after we left Hong Kong, my dad got a posting to Edinburgh, which was to be where we settled. So that's where my dad came out of the army. And I was fortunate enough to go to military boarding school up in Dunblane. And at the time, this was an all-boys military boarding school. And it was quite a tough school at that time, in the late 80s. There was certainly a pecking order between the lads. And because I was such a young lad, small, sensitive, and gentle, and I started there at primary 6, I was certainly easy pickings for bullying. And during my time there, I spent 4.5 years at the boarding school. And sadly, I went through very bad physical and mental bullying, all the way through primary school, right up to the high school of the boarding school. I mean, there were aspects of the school that I did enjoy, but with the bullying, it would come when I'd least expect it. It would come in the early hours of the morning, at night, and the physical bullying I was able to numb to, but it was the mental bullying that I really struggled with. That's what really took root, deep root inside me. When you're called stupid often enough and long enough, over time it wears you down, and you actually start to believe that. And I remember at one point I tried to get some of these bullies back, and I managed to get them one-on-one, and I actually won a fight. But I was fighting a losing battle because they would just gang back up on me, and it would just be even worse. So I was quite traumatized by it for 4.5 years. I did at one point try to leave the school. I tried to convince my parents to let me leave, but the headmaster at the time managed to convince them for me to stay. And I believe at the time it was all about money for the school. So obviously my parents were paying for me to be there. I never held it against them, but that's when I did feel roots of abandonment, and that's when I struggled to trust anyone. I started to withdraw myself. I hated emotions. I hated who I was. I hated what these bullies did to me. But eventually, I was able to actually leave the school. I managed to convince my parents before I was 15 to leave, and then I went to high school. But I think by the time I had left, I think the damage had been done. I think the happy-go-lucky boy that I was when I first started at the boarding school, I was far from that when I left. I was very insecure. I was very insular. I had no confidence. I had no self-worth, and I struggled to make friends. I struggled to trust anyone, and I really hated emotions. For me, emotions had only ever been a weakness. So at that early age, I suppressed them. One of the things I used to do to deal with the pain and the emotion that I was going through was I would actually self-harm. I would cut myself on my arms, somewhere I could hide it. And the pain of that actually gave me a release. It actually, for a split second, for a short period of time, I felt a release from it. But that's how I dealt with the pain that I was feeling. I had no interest in high school, and I just cruised along for a year and a bit until I was 16. I was able to leave, and then I went to college, and then I started getting life experience. I started just getting experience of life, got a part-time job. But one thing is, no matter what I went through at the boarding school, I had always had a deep desire to join the army, and especially I wanted to join the infantry. For me, I wanted to join the infantry to become a tough man, become tough. And I felt that the army would be the place that would do that, especially the infantry. But before I joined the army, when I was 16, when I was at college, I discovered weight training. I actually discovered early on bodybuilding, and I found that my body responded to training very quickly. I put on size, I started getting strong, and it's then that I made that vow that I would never allow anyone to pick on me or hurt me again. And so after that, I went to apply to join the army, and because I was under 18, I need my parents' consent to be in the infantry.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
Mum wouldn't give me that. So in my desperation to join, I went for a trade. I joined the RAF, which was the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers. I thought I'd become a vehicle mechanic like my dad, following my father's footsteps. Hopefully, in doing that, he would be proud of me. But I realised at 17 and what I'd been through as a young lad, I wasn't ready for the army. Even though I was doing well in the training, and I was exceeding in a lot of areas, and my peers, my NCOs, my training officer said, "Bruce, you're doing really well, stick it out." I just gave up, and that became a theme in my life, giving up so easily on things. So after about a month's training, I managed to leave the army. And going home, my dad never said anything. My dad accepted me for who I was, and I know he loved me, but I felt personally that I'd let him down. That was a failure because I couldn't stick it out. But I just got on with life. I went back to college, went back to my old job, working in a fast food restaurant. And for the next couple of years, I just started living life, just getting life experience, started going out and drinking. And this period, this type of life carried on till I was 19. And I remember I was 19 and a half and I got in a bit of a rut. I wasn't going anywhere with my life. I didn't have any career goals. And I realized, you know what, I still want to be in the army. I still want to be in the infantry. And that's what I was proceeding to do. I was planning on joining up, thought I don't need my parents' consent. I'm gonna join the army, I'm gonna join the infantry, and I'm gonna finally be that tough man that I've always wanted to aspire to be. But somehow something took another turn, and instead of actually going to the army, I ended up in the RAF careers office with a friend from school who joined. And I remember hearing a wee bit about a regiment called the RAF Regiment. So I inquired about what these were, because I heard a little bit about them at school, but I never knew who they were. And what I was told was that basically they were infantry. They were infantry trained specialized unit, and what their role was to defend RAF assets and airfields, home and abroad. I thought, I like the sound of this. It's something different. It's still infantry, so that's what I proceeded to go for. I went and sat the entrance test, the aptitude test, to see what level you would, to see what trade you could get. And actually I did very well, and I scored high enough to get to do a decent trade. And they were trying to encourage me to do that, to become an engineer or something like that. And I thought, nah, it's only the infantry that I want. So the RAF Regiment was what my mind was set on. So after that, I started getting myself really fit, training in the gym in all hours, running, because that's all I had my focus. I thought, this is going to be me. This is what I want to do. And within a few months, I went down and I did a selection couple of days where I had to do a couple of interviews, show that I had the aptitude and the attitude they were looking for. I had to set a series of basic infantry fitness tests, which I passed very well. And they seemed to like what they saw, and they offered me a place on the next training course. So at the end of the year, I finally went down to RAF Hollington, which is near Bury St Edmunds. It's in East Anglia, in Suffolk of England. So I went down there to start my training, and it was 6 weeks recruit phase where they trained us from basic civilian to basic soldier. And then we had phase 2 training, which was split into trained soldier phase and combat infantry. And this was to bring us up to the standard of what an infantry soldier was expected to be. But initially during recruit phase training, it was tough. They basically broke us down to then remold us. I remember no matter how well we did on our kit inspections, our room inspections, we were up to all hours. Lucky if we got 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. But I remember stood there to attention on our inspections, and there would always end up being a boot flying here, a mattress flying there. The corporals would just completely destroy your lockers, destroy your bed, and it was basically to break you down and so that they could mold you. So I got through the 6 weeks recruit phase very quickly. Went home for a week's leave or so, came back, started trained soldier phase. And this was to take us from basic recruit to that of a trained soldier. We then started doing field exercises, learning basic soldiering skills, learning how to shoot on the different ranges. And the training progressed and got harder and harder. The fitness tests got harder and harder. And I was actually doing very well. I was exceeding in areas, and I was doing not so well in others. But we each had each other's back, so we were helping each other get through. And then we went into combat infantry phase, and this was the phase that was now basically to take us from a trained soldier up to an infantier, expected of any British infantry soldier. And the exercises got longer, exercises got harder, and sleep deprivation got got less and less. But one of the things that really stood out for me during my combat infantry training was bayonet training. And one of the things that they did is they would beast us. That was the term. They would give us physical, not punishments, but they would push us physically and not give us any sleep, trying to get the aggression out of us. And then on the day of bayonet training, they would push us to get the aggression out, and they would channel that aggression. And then what we had to do was we would then have to bayonet a simulated enemy, which was a dummy. And the one thing I found out of this, the controlled aggression, I never actually knew that I had this aggression in me. My sergeants and my corporals were pleased with me. I remember my sergeant saying, "Bruce, I'm very impressed. You're going to do well in the regiment. You're going to go far. Just keep doing what you're doing." So during the combat infantry phase, we were learning all the basics of infantry skills, and we learned section attacks, section maneuvers, and we built this all up in the exercises that we did, one big final exercise. And then during that exercise, we were doing patrols, we were doing section attacks. We were actually, at this point during my career, we were actually still doing what we call trench warfare. And at that time during the Cold War, the RAF Regiment, they did Harrier force protection, where Harriers could deploy anywhere in the field, and we would dig in trenches, 4-man trenches, as protection. So on the final exercise, we did a big flight or platoon move in full kit with about 80 pounds. Lucky if we slept at all that week, probably about 6 or 7 hours in total. And we did a huge 6-mile patrol. And then we dropped the Bergens, and then we did a big section and platoon attack onto a mocked village. And then at the end of it, we heard index, and we were literally almost at the end of our training. And the only thing we had left to do before our passing out parade was field firing. And we went down to Sennybridge in Wales to do this. And basically, the field firing that we were doing, this would be the closest that you would ever get to actually firing live ammunition in a war zone, but in a controlled range. And we would start from individual shooting, individual range, building up to what we call pairs fire and maneuver, to a fire team attack, to an 8-man section. And we built right up to a full platoon attack on 3 or 4 positions. And because it was live ammunition, it was live firing, and we were all maneuvering.
He's coming. Jesus is.
Life Stories.
Through the ranges, the safety staff had to be very precise on their safety and controlling the fire. But this was the closest that we would ever get to doing it without doing it for real. And then before we know it, we had done that. And we were then rehearsing for our passing out parade. And that's when we got our number ones, and then finally had our passing out parade. And then before I know it, I'd completed my training, I'd got through. And I found my identity. I found who I wanted to be. I found I was now an infantry soldier. I was an RAF Regiment gunner, as we were known. And I saw myself doing this for the rest of my life. So not long after that, I was then posted to my first unit. And that was at the depot, the regiment depot at Honington. And at the time, it was quite secretive what we were doing, in the sense that the squadron that I was on was a highly secure compound. I mean, now I can say we were guarding the nuclear deterrent for the nation. But it seemed a glamorous job, but it was just basically walking the wire and guarding a highly secure compound. And the good thing about that was it was 4 on 4 off. So I did that for a couple of years, while also still carrying on and doing regular infantry training and keeping up our infantry skills. I got my first posting somewhere else to Northern Ireland. So I then got posted to 3 Squadron, who were based at RAF Aldergrove, and we were tasked with the AOR, area of responsibility, looking after in and around Belfast International Airport and the RAF base, which was joined onto that. But we worked closely with the IUC and the Army, and for the 2 years that I was there, we worked all over. We worked up in Londonderry, we were on the streets of West Belfast, we patrolled the border areas of South Armagh, and pretty much all the 6 counties of Northern Ireland I was privileged to work in. And I got married at this point when I was newly posted to Northern Ireland. And unfortunately, I put my job before my wife. We always used to jokingly say that if we were meant to have a wife, we'd go down to stores and be issued one. And that was always the running joke. But no, sadly, I put my job before my wife. My wife never conformed to being a forces wife. She had a career in Belfast. And there were times I was lucky if I saw her, because of my shift pattern and because of where she worked and her hours, we were like passing ships in the night at times. And there would sometimes it would go for days on end where I wouldn't see her because of work commitments. And I certainly took to military life very well. I played hard and worked hard like soldiers do. And it was encouraged to drink, and I took to the drinking culture very well. You know, like I said, for me, the military was everything. My job came first, and I wouldn't allow anything to come before that, even my marriage. And unfortunately, I initially went through a marriage breakup when I was in Northern Ireland. Not proud of the things that I'd done, but we split up, and I ended up starting seeing a girl from West Belfast. And I was actually eventually to get in a bit of trouble for that, because in my irrational thinking and the way I was at the time, I hadn't got her cleared to be able to see her. Because she lived in an out of bounds area, you're meant to get people cleared through security and intelligence before you were actually meant to allow to meet up with them. Anyway, I carried on seeing this girl, and this was to get me into trouble. Nearly cost me my career. Thankfully, my peers helped me manage to salvage it. I was living a very reckless lifestyle at this point. I wasn't giving any thought to others or what I was doing. This was the first time that I took my car off camp, drink driving. I crashed the car. Somehow the guy managed to get me back to the camp, and my peers covered for me. And I was lucky to get off. Managed to get my car recovered and put this behind me. But yeah, I was making some reckless choices even back then. But they do look after their own, especially in my regiment, in the flight I was on. Anyway, I managed to get myself back on track. I was got myself sorted out and carried on. And unfortunately, I ended up ruining this relationship with the girl Sarah from West Belfast, as I seem to always wreck relationships. And then for some reason managed to get back in contact with my ex-wife. She came through to see friends in Northern Ireland, and we thought we'd rekindle. So we thought we'd get back together. So at this point, I managed to get a posting to Lossiemouth, to 51 Squadron. This was a squadron that was just newly reformed. My wife at the time didn't want to come back to Ireland, so I took the posting to go back to Scotland. My wife lived in Edinburgh. We had a flat there, so I was initially travelling up to. I was based up in the north of Scotland, and I was travelling down to see my wife at the weekends. Even though it was maybe a fresh start, I hadn't changed. I was still the reckless husband. I was still living for self. I was still living for my job, and sadly, again, I eventually wasn't being faithful to my wife. And I thought I had the best of both worlds. I was living as a single lad during the week, and then going home to be the devoted husband at the weekends. Anyway, life went on. I was it was September 11th, 2001, and we were doing routine squadron training up at a place called Gaelic Head. and we were doing field firing, and I just come off what we call a pairs fire manoeuvre range, and it was 11th of September 2001. All this training that we were doing was building up for when we were going out to become the routine squadron out in Kuwait, because at the time you had the no-fly zone over Iraq. United States, the British Air Force were flying their aircraft out of Ali Al Salem to enforce that in Kuwait, and our role was to be the protection for the airbase out there. Anyway, as we were just coming on, as I just came off the range, some lad went to me, "Bruce, you're not gonna believe this. Some plane's just flown into the World Trade Center," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're pulling my leg." But as we started listening to the radio, because we were out in the middle of nowhere on the ranges, we heard what had happened, and then we heard another plane had hit, and we thought, our immediate thoughts were, well, this is war's going to come from this, and that's all we were thinking, that at some point we're going to go to war because of this. But it was a very surreal day, and things heated up. I think all over the place. Security went up, and our training intensified. We were still going out to Kuwait, and we then deployed there in December of 2001. We were there for 4 months. We came back for 4 months, and then we went back out for another 4-month tour. So we did 2 tours in the space of a year. And it was we were just basically guarding the airbase out there, doing routine patrols. We were working with the United States Air Force Security Police. We would patrol anywhere up to 6 to 10 miles outside the base, and I really enjoyed it because we got to see the remote desert, and it was a pretty good tour. It was, there was no real threat, there was no danger. It was just one of these routine tours that we were tasked to do.
He's coming, Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming, Jesus is coming, and when he comes